Well, hey everybody, it's Sandy and welcome back to my channel dedicated to helping you advocate for your own health one topic at a time. So guys, today I want to talk again about the Delta variant and my thoughts on that, because that's been coming up a lot in the Facebook group. And then I also want to talk about this issue of booster shots coming up. So yeah, please bear with me. I'm kind of trying to get used to filming on the phone. That's just not something I do. I always like the precision of being on my laptop and stuff in terms of editing. So this is going to be something that forces me a little bit out of my comfort zone because there's not going to be any editing here. So yeah, I'm just going to have to learn to get comfortable with it. And so bear with me. Yeah, so there's been some chatting in the Facebook group about both these issues. So one person put an article up, and I'm sure we've all read by now about the Pfizer study in Israel saying that they have found that the vaccine, the Pfizer vaccine that is about 64% effective against the Delta variant, which really scared a lot of us, including myself. But, on closer inspection, it turned out that they found a growing correlation between people who had gotten vaccinated much earlier. And then that brought up two questions. One, does that mean the vaccine efficacy is waning over time? The immunity is going away? Or does it mean that this is because people at that time who got vaccinated, like back in January, for example, in Israel, it was only older people, like over 70. So there's a confounding variable there. And, what they found is that the overwhelming majority of people who were breakthrough cases with Delta variant were over 70. So that could also be a reflection of the fact that immunity response to that vaccine is reduced in people who are elderly in the first place. Now, if that's the issue, of course, you would still be seeing some breakthrough cases in elderly people. Well, no, forget that. Anyway, I am more and more encouraged about this, and ironically, I'm still optimistic. Every day it seems I'm a little more optimistic about the immune protection that we're going to have with these messenger RNA vaccines, even with this Delta variant. And, part of that is just because, they did determine in that Israeli study that it really is, first of all, too small a study group. So they're going to have to parse this out further with more and more study. But more importantly, when I look elsewhere, like here, the Delta is also now the predominant variant in the United States. So that didn't take long. The majority of people who are hospitalized, at least in my area, I consult with colleagues of mine who have patients hospitalized and patients out and about who are not hospitalized but are COVID positive. The overwhelming majority of them are people who aren't not vaccinated. So, that's a lot of... it's not empirical advice, it's not empirical information. That's a lot of just anecdotal stuff. But I think that's largely documented out in our society that the vast majority of people now who are coming down with COVID are the people who are unvaccinated. That's not to say there aren't breakthrough cases. They don't seem to be resulting in hospitalizations and things like that. Now, we have had the discussion here, can you become a long hauler after breakthrough? And that's a really important question. But that's kind of beyond the scope of this video, and it still doesn't evade my point, which is that I'm finding that the more that information comes out, that I am more and more impressed with these messenger RNA vaccines, grateful that we have them, and I am more encouraged that they are going to be protective against even the Delta variant, just like they have with all the other variants of concern in the past. Remember when we were so concerned about the British variant? Now that seems like nothing. So that brings me to the next topic that has come up in the Facebook group. And by the way, for those of you who don't know about it, it's Sandy's DIY Health Advocacy Facebook group. You can ask to join. And there's a lot of healthy debate in there. And the next point I'm going to make is about boosters. I kind of get a little bit beat up sometimes, then that's fine. I'm not complaining. I'm glad there's some healthy debate in there. And people are entitled to all different opinions. You're entitled to whatever opinion is yours, and just be nice on the Facebook group, which people are, and I so appreciate it. So again, I'm not convinced that we're going to need boosters. So some of us already know that Pfizer has come out and is asking for FDA, EUA, or approval for booster vaccines very shortly. And, I'm going to say what I said before on whether we need boosters. I'm not really going to take my advice from the drug company that makes it, especially since they're not giving out the information to show that we need it at this point. And again, my earlier point, which is that the vast majority of people who are getting sick at this point, and almost exclusively people who end up in the hospital, are people who are not vaccinated. I am having trouble believing that we all need boosters right now. Now, one thing the Israelis are doing is offering a third shot to people who are immunocompromised and immunosuppressed, and I think that's a great idea, and I really hope that we do that here, because it seems that that third shot can push those people who generally underproduce the antibodies. It can push them up into the normal range, and I really hope that we start doing that here too. I think that's great. But for the regular broad population across the board, where we're excluding, subgroups like that, I don't see any real world evidence, nor do I see any empirical evidence in study that we're going to need that. And by the way, there's different ways that they might document to make the case that we need booster shots. One way would be that they would just say that they continue to test the blood of their subjects in study and have found antibodies reduced. Another way is that we see real world data that the people in those groups are getting sick. I personally would rely much more heavily on the latter data and not so much the former, because there's not been an established number in terms of the quantitative antibodies. There's not really been an established number to show that what's protective. Now, there is a test against the spike antibody protein. Now, the CDC, the FDA don't recommend having that test in order to see how your vaccine worked, so to speak. However, I do know some people are doing those tests in clinical trials. That's how we know that people who are immunocompromised have a lesser response to these vaccines. And that particular test, the spike protein, it has to be an antibody test to the spike protein, because the messenger RNA vaccines are designed to make you react against the spike protein. So you can't have an antibody test against some other part of the virus. Now, if you were sick with the disease, you reacted to the entire virus. So you could have any antibody test at all, and it should test positive that you've been exposed and you've reacted. But when they look at the response to vaccines, it is look at the spike protein antibodies. So I know that test is resulting on a scale of 0 to 20. And the results are anything over 1 is considered a response, is considered that you've made antibodies. So Juan Suarez, who I've had on my channel before, he's a physician who was one of the first ones to use ivermectin, and we talked a great deal about that on my channel. I'm going to link his video if I can here. I'll put it down in the description box most likely. But he tells me that he is testing every one of his vaccinated patients who will agree to be tested, and he is consistently getting a result of greater than 20, because the test only goes up to 20. So if you produced more antibodies than that, it's greater than 20. And every single one of his patients, with the exception of one who received the messenger RNA vaccine, are testing at over 20. Interestingly, he told me that he's also looked at a few of his patients who've tested after having received the J&J vaccine, and they're getting around 1.4, 1.5. And now that's still positive, I guess, but I think that speaks to the point of how protective one is versus the other. I also think we might find out with some time that the Moderna maybe is even more protective than the Pfizer. It is a higher dose of messenger RNA. There was a Canadian study that was not peer-reviewed, and I don't know why they didn't go to 2 doses, but they looked at the protectiveness against the Delta variant, and they said something like 72% after 1 dose of Moderna. I don't know if that's going to be substantiated or not, but there are just so many studies. It's just going to be a while before we come to conclusion and parse this out. But as far as boosters are concerned, I'm just not there yet. And I'm really interested in seeing when they come out with, how much is protective against mild disease, moderate disease, hospitalization. They're going to have to put it somewhere on that scale in the quantitative antibody serum test. So that's going to be really interesting to see. So yeah, I know that we have a whole bell curve of opinions, especially in the Facebook group about these issues. But I'm an optimist, but I'm a skeptic. And I am just so surprised at my own optimism on this. And I hope it bears itself out. If it doesn't, we're going to know. But despite everything coming out about this Delta variant, I think that people who are vaccinated, I like to think that we're in good shape. My optimism is cautious. Yeah, let's see. So let me know what your thoughts are. You can go ahead and put it down in the comments section. Again, you can ask to join Sandy's DIY Health Advocacy Facebook group. If you like this video, please give it a like. And if you haven't subscribed and you find my content helpful, I really hope that you'll consider subscribing. That's my way forward to grow my channel. My channel is largely a public service that I started doing after 30 years of being an advanced practice nurse. And yeah, so I've got a little bit of upcoming content I had talked about before, but there's one new one I'm going to shortly have on a nurse practitioner who has a background and specialty in sleep disorder. And we're going to talk about that as it relates to COVID and long haul COVID. So I should have that video up pretty soon. And yeah, so until next time, be well. Bye-bye.